Well, we're heading back out to the McBride Auto Salvage Yard for the other half of that because there was just too much to cover last week. So we're back again this week to look at the rest of the amazing collectible cars that are out there and a few other just amazing, amazing things that are there at McBride's. So check it out, part 2 of the McBrides Wrecking Yard. McBride's Wrecking Yard is located at the old abandoned Grantsville Airport. 3 generations of McBrides have lived on this land, some 40 to 50 acres of rusting hulks of very, very interesting cars. There are a lot of Studebakers here. Aaron McBride, the original McBride, just loved himself a Studebaker, so he bought a lot of Studebakers. Now, some of the people here in Grantsville have called this place an eyesore, and they'd like to see it gone. I, for one, find this place magical. These abandoned cars are, in their own right, something of a work of art. Check out this Mercedes-Benz. Some part of me just wants to adopt it and bring it home, and some other part of me would like to just leave it the way it is. Now, the real high grade is kept over in the old airplane hangar at the old airport. Aaron McBride bought a lot of these cars when they weren't really even collectible. Check out this beautiful Barracuda, and it's 100% original with very low miles. Now, here's an unusual car. It's the 25th anniversary T-Bird, but this was a special edition called the 007 T-Bird, themed after James Bond. They only made 700 of them, and only one of them ended up in Utah, and that was grabbed up by Larry Miller, Utah's premier car collector. Larry's collection also lived in Grantsville, only a few miles from McBride Auto Wrecking. Larry only collected Fords, but look at the Fords. Larry also built an entire motorsports park, in part just so he'd have a place to race his collection of cars, all of which he routinely drove on the track, even though some of these cars are valued at over $10 million. Larry passed away just a few years ago, and the track has been sold. And the collection has been moved to a non-disclosed location somewhere. The 007 T-Bird was Gail Miller's personal ride, Larry's wife, and unfortunately it was involved in a front-end collision, and that's how it ended up here at McBride's in need of some significant rebuilding. But Dennis and his wife always wanted a 007 T-Bird, so much so that they even built a tribute version, and it's one of their personal cars. Now, Aaron McBride also loved Indian motorcycles, bought several for his collection. This is a Bonneville 80 Indian. He paid $720 for it. Hardly ever rode it, and here it sits with very, very, very few miles on it. The Bonneville was named for the Bonneville Salt Flats because, well, they were racing a lot of Indians out at the Bonneville Salt Flats. This one was never raced, but that didn't stop Aaron and his friends from racing out there. In fact, they became quite legendary out there. Now this very interesting little thing is an Indian Papoose. It's a folding motorcycle. It all folds up into a neat little package, fits neatly into a backpack. In World War II, paratroopers would take these on the mission, throw it out of the airplane. It came down on its own parachute. Once on the ground, they'd retrieve the motorcycles, unfold them, fire them up, and drive them around till they ran out of gas. Most of them ended up getting tossed in a ditch. Now, as I said earlier, the guys loved racing their Indian motorcycles out at Bonneville. They blew the engine on this one here, and Burt Munro rebuilt the engine, and it's sitting here with the Burt Munro rebuilt engine in it as we speak. Now, Burt Munro made quite a name for himself out at Bonneville with this thing. It's an Indian motorcycle, but it's been highly evolved. I guess you could say that this is a fairing on it, but it makes it very aerodynamic, and he was able to break a lot of speed records with it. At the time, Burt Munro was really only known among the Bonneville community, but after this movie came out, World's Fastest Indian, he became quite well known with the general public. The movie does a pretty decent job of telling his story, but in the real world, he found his way out to Bonneville year after year after year and became quite a fixture out there. Now, the closest town to the Bonneville Salt Flats is this place, Wendover, Utah, right on the Nevada border. And the guys thought that it would be fun to build a museum out here. So, with the help of another collector, Richard Dix, they moved a lot of cars out and rented an old airplane hangar. It was a B-29 hangar, so it was really large, and they turned it into a museum. Today, the Wendover Air Force Base is being completely rehabilitated and turned into an Air Force museum. Millions of dollars being spent here. Wendover is just far enough off the beaten path that nothing really happened with the Air Force Base out here. It wasn't improved, it wasn't torn down, it was just pretty much ignored. And now it's the only World War II era Air Force Base with a completely intact flight line. And so they're rebuilding all of the hangars and bringing it back into its original condition. It's also still being used as an active Air Force base. This hangar on the left is the National Guard hangar, and they're flying drones out of here. It's taking a lot of years to get this put back together and some considerable expenditures. It's being split between the state of Utah and the federal government, but they're raising the necessary money to rebuild all of these hangars and get everything back online. Most of the barracks have either fallen down or been torn down, but in its day, this Air Force base housed 20,000 men. The Wendover Air Force Base has great historical significance, as this is where the 509th Air Composite Group trained. These were the guys who were training to drop atomic bombs. The 509th was commanded by Colonel Paul Tibbets, who actually was the pilot that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. They were working here at Wendover to figure out how to work with these bombs and how to drop them without blowing their own airplane up. And this giant hangar was the one that housed the B-29s. It was the servicing facility for the 12 B-29s and also the offices of the command. What you see here is the Indian Bonneville on display in the hangar at Wendover when the guys were using it as a museum. And in Colonel Tibbets' office, they found this pinball machine. Now, Paul Tibbets was an avid pinball fanatic and had a pinball machine right there in his office in the hangar. and these guys just kind of liberated it. And these days it resides in the old abandoned hangar at the Grantsville Airport. Okay, here's another interesting car. This is a Studebaker Avante. There weren't a lot of Studebaker Avantes built. The plan was to build quite a few of them, but Studebaker ran into all kinds of production problems and just couldn't get the things out to the public. They planned on building 25,000 of them in 1963. They were only able to produce 3,834 of them. A few of them were built as race models, the R2 race model with a Paxton supercharger. And it was their intent to take this thing to Bonneville and make it the fastest production car in America. Because it was going to be equipped with a Paxton supercharger, they had to strike a deal with Andy Granatelli, owner of Paxton. One thing led to another, and Studebaker ended up buying out Paxton, and Andy Granatelli ended up driving the car at Bonneville to set the land speed record. The racing instrument cluster is substantially different than the stock version. Andy Granatelli did drive this car at Bonneville and was able to break 29 land speed records with it, including fastest production car at 168 miles an hour. Subsequently, they pushed the car to 172 miles per hour. Granatelli liked the car so much it became his personal ride. And here it sits with less than 50,000 miles on it in like-new condition. The amount of history out here at the old Grantsville Airport is almost unfathomable. 3 generations of McBrides just screwing around out here at the old airport. But they have run into a bit of a problem. It seems that these days the dirt underneath the cars is worth substantially more than the cars. Housing developers are trying to force them off the land, and the city of Grantsville is threatening to use eminent domain to clear them out. Dennis McBride is claiming that the city of Grantsville is harassing him. He's even been arrested, and he has now filed a countersuit against the city, charging them with corruption, racketeering, and harassment. A lot of car people are joining the fight. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
The McBride Auto Salvage Yard and car collection, really more than anything.
Wow.
They don't seem to be all that anxious to sell parts off of any of those things, although they do.
Yeah.
Mostly it's just sort of their personal car collection. Acres and acres and acres, I don't know how many acres, 50 acres of
I wouldn't even guess.
cars that they've just collected
cool,
over
really.
the years.
Yeah.
The family has been at that for some, who knows, 70 years? I don't know how long. They've been at that, at least 50 years.
At least,
because that's how, when I first ran into them was 50 years ago. And
Right.
there they are still at it.
Yep.
And the really interesting thing to me is that the old cars, the ones out in the wrecking yard, were once brand new cars, just like this one. Somebody's pride and joy, and they took it home and
Babied it.
they babied
took
it. The
care of
neighbors
it.
all came out, and everybody looked at the new car. It got waxed every Sunday or every Saturday or whatever. And
Yeah.
the kids weren't allowed to chew gum in it and,
Or eat in it.
or eat in it.
We
or
were never
anything.
allowed to eat in our cars.
You know, and everybody, it just.
Get a
And now
brand new car, it is, baby.
they're there.
Yeah.
They're just
It's
bleaching in the sun.
Yeah.
where
I've often
they-
wondered how many of my cars ended up in an auto salvage yard, though, because I usually drive them till they die of natural causes. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I'm assuming that some of mine have, but I don't know, because you don't know.
You don't know.
You sell them and you get rid of them and you trade them in and you do whatever, and then they're just gone, and
They're
you
gone
really
for
have
good.
no idea
Yeah.
whatever becomes of them. And unless, of course, you've actually sold one to a
Yeah.
wrecking yard, and
Right.
then you know exactly where it ended up. Pretty amazing.
Amazing.
Well, anyway, if you haven't been over to the channel to watch the 130 or whatever movies that are over there, shame on you.
Yeah.
You should get over to the channel and watch those. And you can do that by clicking on the blue button, which is going to be appearing shortly. You can also click on the little rocket ship if you're not in full screen. But here in about 10 seconds, a blue button's going to pop in right over here that says subscribe, and you can click on that. And if you're not a subscriber, you will then be a subscriber. And if you are a subscriber, you can just watch more movies. Either way, it's a win-win scenario for you. Well, we're not sure how you found this fun and exciting and informative movie on the internet, but we hope you didn't find it boring. And we'll see you here again in 1 week with some more massive and significant and informative screwing around. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.